Opportunity for community engagement, and from the perspective of many people in the community, the process just wasn't very transparent. And so it's our intention to have a very transparent and public process this time around. I wanted to make sure that we've heard from you. This is structured tonight with a lot of thought in terms of how best we can hear from you on some very specific, and I hope you'll agree, urgent issues. So I want to thank you for being part of an experiment to hear from the public on a higher level than has been done in the past. For anybody who you know who is unable to attend tonight, that's probably a lot of people, or for anybody who'd like to follow up with the city, an online submission form has been created by my office for you to give feedback electronically, and that'll be shared by me, by Commissioner Hardesty, and other members of the council. The form is currently housed on my webpage at the City of Portland website. You can find the feedback questionnaire right on the main page under its own tab. So we're all excited to hear from you tonight. This is an important issue from the perspective of the community. The goal is to get to a fair and reasonable contract with the Portland Police Association, and I look forward to that conversation taking place. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of tonight's presentation, I want to give Commissioner Hardesty an opportunity to share some words as well.
And thank each and every one of you for coming out this evening. I'm going to read, because if I don't read my notes, I forget something, and I sit down and go, darn. First, of course, I want to thank all of you for being here. We know that the public has a big interest in policing in Portland, and it's basically why you all took time out of your schedule to be here tonight. These listening sessions, as the mayor said, are about transparency and community engagement. We are here to listen to you. On that note, we don't want you talking to me or the mayor, right? We're going to be walking around listening to table conversations, right? But it's really about talking to your neighbors, your community members, and coming up with the best advice that you can give us, right? So when you see us, don't stop your conversation and start lobbying us. You know how to lobby us already, right? We know that last cycle, as the mayor said, left a lot to be desired. And that's why we're starting early, and that's why we're talking to the community, because we again know that the public has a big interest in making sure that both it's a fair contract, that it represents the police, but it also represents the public interest. And it's a process, and this is how we start that process. When you walked in, you all voted on your top priorities that you want to talk about tonight. Right now, the facilitators are tallying them up, and do we have tallies? He'll take it from there. Okay, Matt's going to talk about the overview of tonight, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to actually together develop some ground rules, okay? I can't hear you, okay? All right.
Yeah, thank you. And I work in advising on labor and employment issues. So the mayor and commissioner asked if I would just give a brief overview for everybody of collective bargaining, just so you can understand what's this process going to look like and kind of what are the parameters that we're working within when we're talking about bargaining. So the first thing is just to know that the Oregon law gives public employees the right to be represented by unions, and the law that covers that is called the Public Employees Collective Bargaining Act. You'll hear people call it the PECBA. Then there's an agency, a state agency, that has the authority to interpret that law and to enforce that law, and they are called the Employment Relations Board. So under the law, both the public employer and the union can demand to negotiate about employment relations. Employment relations is a concept that includes matters concerning monetary benefits and other such things like wages and health insurance. It addresses hours, vacation, sick leave, grievance procedures, and then there's other conditions of employment that are also covered, but aren't specified in the law. So those are the kinds of things that employers and unions have to come together and talk about and make agreement upon if one side wants to have something in their contract about that. It's also good to understand what was the intent behind the law. The intent behind the law was to really bring parties together, between unions and employers together, to try to create harmony in labor, so that workers are happy and comfortable coming to work, and employers are happy with their employees. The contract negotiations can last not less than 150 days. So it's not a quick process. When it starts, we do have to go for a minimum of 150 days before, if things aren't working out, before we can say we're having a hard time, we want to say we're at an impasse. Also, though, if parties are able to work out all the differences that they're having, they can come to an agreement sooner and you can get a contract earlier. So one thing that's required that's very important for us going into bargaining is that we bargain in good faith. Good faith bargaining is a legal concept, and it has some gray to it. It's not a black and white thing by any means. But in essence, you want to come to bargaining with an open mind. You want to come to bargaining to listen to the other side and with your own ideas as well, and with the intent that you're going to try to reach a contract and you're going to try to reach agreement on everything, and that each party will listen and hear and give ground where it's appropriate to give ground. It doesn't mean you have to, but where it is appropriate, that each side will at least consider the other side's point and make some compromises where they seem appropriate. In that process, there may be things that both sides agree to that they want to change, and they do something called enter into a tentative agreement. We also call that a TA. So while we go through this process, you may see that some things will have a TA on it, a tentative agreement. That means both sides have agreed that we like this language, what we've come up with. It still has to go to council, and it still has to go to the union membership to be ultimately ratified. So that's just an agreement by the people at the bargaining table negotiating that they think tentatively, we think we have something that's going to work for all of us. But that's not the final say, because council has the final say and the union membership has the final say. At the end of the 150-day bargaining period, if the parties decide that they're not getting farther on the issues that still are outstanding, either side can do something called declare impasse, and that means that they're stuck and they're not getting any farther on whatever's remaining, whatever issues are remaining. At that point that they declare impasse, there's two different ways you can go. For police, fire, and 911 dispatchers and call takers, they go a route called interest arbitration. This is because they are public safety employees, they are not allowed to go on strike because we need them to be there when we need them. But the rest of public employees are allowed to go on strike at that point if there's no agreement and they feel that's what they need to do to get a contract that they feel works for them. But for public safety employees, the process is that then you go to something called interest arbitration. This is a hearing that can take several months before it gets scheduled and before we can get through the hearing. But that hearing is a place where 2 weeks before that hearing, each side comes up with what is the best final last offer that they are willing to make on all the issues that still are left that they haven't resolved. Each side puts all those things into their last best offer. Those get turned into the interest arbitrator. You'll have witnesses, you'll have evidence about why your last best offer is the one that should be adopted by the arbitrator. And then at the end of that, the arbitrator picks one or the other. And it is an all or nothing deal. So, and a lot of states aren't like that. A lot of states, the arbitrator can pick and choose things from each side. But Oregon, the reason they did that, at least as my understanding of the legislative history, is that they want parties to come as close together as possible, so that when you go to interest arbitration, you'll be as close as you possibly can, and your last best offer will be as reasonable as it can be, because if it's not, if you have one thing in there that's completely unreasonable and everything else is reasonable, you may lose on all of it. So you want to be careful at the very end that whatever you're giving to the interest arbitrator, you feel good that you're making a reasonable offer at the very end. And then that's it. The decision of the interest arbitrator is binding on all of us, if we end up there. Just so you understand, there are a few things that are that are required by state and federal law, some things that are controlled by the Constitution, like due process. Public employees have due process rights to their job. It's considered a property. So same as you can't take away a citizen's property without due process, you also can't take away a public employee's job for most public employees without due process. So that is one thing that's constitutionally required and that we can't just do away with. The other thing, some other things are state law controlled, like I was telling you, the Public Employees Collective Bargaining Act, that controls some of how we act. There's also, for police in particular, there's something called the Officers' Bill of Rights. That law is a state law, and we can't give less than what's in there. So it's helpful for people, as we're going through this process, because it takes so long, it is helpful if people can also familiarize yourself with the state Officers' Bill of Rights, so you know the things that you can't do less than that, and then you'll understand that. That being said, those are just a few examples, but for the most part, there are many things we can bargain about, and we're very interested in hearing from all of you and what your interests are. And thank you so much.